Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Andrew Muff, and I run Demand Gen here at Cask. Cask is a leading open-source big data software company based in Palo Alto, California. Its flagship offering, the Cask Data Application Platform, or CDAP, makes it possible for developers and organizations to easily build, integrate, and deploy powerful applications on Hadoop and Spark. Today's webinar is titled What's New in CDAP 3.5 and is presented by Nitin Motgi. Nitin is a founder and CTO of Cask, where he's responsible for developing the company's long-term technology vision, driving company engineering initiatives, and collaboration. Prior to Cask, Nitin was at Yahoo working on a large-scale content optimization system externally known as Core. So just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box on your GoToWebinar control panel, and we will have about 10 to 15 minutes for questions at the end of the presentation. So with that, let's get started. Nitin, take it away.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate the introduction. It's great to be speaking with you all today. We're going to be talking about what's new in CDAP 3.5 release. The first thing that I wanted to bring to you guys' attention is the release date for 3.5 is scheduled to be August 19th. It's just a few weeks away. Currently, we are in testing with the customers, so this might possibly come a little bit earlier than that. I just wanted to let you guys know the planned date right now for release date for CDAP 3.5 is August 19th. For those of you who have don't know what comes along with CDAP and what are the components that are part of CDAP, the main component that's part of like the overall is a platform. It's basically a platform that integrates and abstracts the underlying Hadoop technologies. It's mainly built to provide data analytic solutions, whether on cloud or on-prem. Along with that comes a Cask Hydrator. It's a self-service reconfigurable way of building data pipelines, whether it's real-time on batch for on-prem or on cloud. A tracker is a self-service tool for tracking the flow of data in and out of the data lake. It basically indexes all of the technical, business, and operational metadata and makes it easy for you to search across all of them. And along comes with all of the APIs that allows you to build applications similar to like the Hydrator and Tracker that we have included as part of the CDAP releases. So for people who don't know where overall CDAP fits into, CDAP runs on any of the distributions that are widely available in the market, plus the Apache distribution. And it can be running on whether on-prem or on the cloud. So from a CDAP perspective, it's an integration middleware layer that provides an abstraction layer for these developers to build these data application solutions. And these applications that are built on top of CDAP, they are essentially using the public APIs of CDAP. So to give you guys an idea of what are the use cases that we have been solving with these technologies, from a CDAP perspective, many people use it to build operational analytics applications. They also use it for building microservices, data as services, self-service lakes, and essentially the API empowers developers to easily come and build data solutions on top of it. It's basically an abstraction technology that future-proofs and allows you to integrate with different set of underlying technologies that exist on Hadoop. So Cask Hydrator is basically allowing you to build data ingestion pipelines, right? Ingestion is just part of the data pipelines, is the initial part of the data pipelines, but you can essentially combine, blend, transforms, do lookups, integrate machine learning and aggregations as part of the pipelines. You can build, people have been building a lot of real-time and batch data pipelines along with it. And most of the work that we have been doing recently is focused on enabling data warehouse offloading, Netezza offloading, Teradata offloading, and also it's being used to fast ingest into Impala. And we have been working with a lot of different sources to integrate this ingestion essentially as part of it. So the Cask Tracker, it's an easy way to catalog applications and pipeline level metadata. It allows you to, people have been using it to search across all of the technical, business, and operational metadata. It provides a much easier way to look at the lineage and provenance of the data. So it not only allows you to see the flow of data within the Hadoop cluster, but also allows you to track data that's coming into the cluster and going out of the cluster. Recently, we have added capabilities for performing usage analytics. There's a lot of data quality metrics associated and integrated with the tracker. And just to play nice with all of the ecosystem components, the first integration that we have done is with Navigator. So all of the data that gets generated by the tracker is being pushed into Navigator. So these are some of the customer use cases and things that we have been doing customers related to all these three technologies that exist. So going back to the timeline of general releases of CDAP, you can see that like since Reactor 1.0, which was CDAP was previously called Reactor, the first release was back in 2011. Right now in 2016, we are at CDAP release 3.5. There are a lot of great features and capabilities that have been added to the platform that allows you to basically help solve real use cases that are being surfaced up in the Hadoop ecosystem. So the recent release is what we'll be talking about today, and we'll talk about the main features and capabilities that have been added as part of CDAP release 3.5. And as we go through the process, I'll be also demonstrating certain aspects of CDAP so that you guys can look at how this whole thing is being integrated and how it helps you solve certain use cases with this feature release. So going back to the release highlights, so the majority of the work on CDAP release 3.5 has been focused around security. We have done a lot of work in terms of authentication and authorization, essentially to provide a fine-grained role-based access control for different entities within CDAP. Many of the customers have been talking about our ability to, we previously had only ability to run as a CDAP user, a fixed user. So with impersonation, we are now able to run as any user is configured to run essentially the jobs within the cluster. We have also added capabilities, a lot of capabilities around encryption that basically allows you to encrypt a lot of sensitive data like passwords, usernames, and tokens and such things. So it's just as part of the security features. It's integrated really well into CDAP and Hydrator. We have also made a lot of improvements in terms of Hydrator. Hydrator has now integrated Spark streaming, so you can build data pipelines using Spark streaming as an engine that runs these pipelines through Hydrator. There is an alpha feature that we are introducing in Hydrator called the preview mode, and the whole idea of the preview mode is ability to test your pipelines functionally before deploying them, so you can ensure that the pipelines are working correctly before you deploy it into the environment that you want to run in. We have also added join capabilities and ability to run custom actions within Hydrator. Plus Hydrator, we have added a lot of different plugins. Now we have support for mainframes and such that I'll be talking about a little bit later. From a tracker perspective, many of our customers when they were looking at all of these different data sets that were in the cluster, one of the problems they were constantly seeing was like, what are the different, how are the different data sets being used and who is using them? So with this release 3.5, we have added a capability for keeping track of generating the analytics around all of these different things, right? This gives you a visibility into how the data sets are being used within the cluster. The other feature that was added is the metadata taxonomy. So you can use your own taxonomy to annotate different data sets that exist within the cluster. So with this, it standardizes how your data sets are being named within the cluster or tagged within the cluster. So it makes it easy to search for the data sets that are likely tagged. So with that, I'm going to go into each individual capabilities that we have added. So we'll start with CDAP. So from an authentication and authorization perspective, essentially, with this implementation, we'll be able to isolate data and operations from users unless the access has been explicitly granted to them, right? So you can think of like different data sets and applications and namespaces. You can provide more granular role-based authorization on top of that. Now you can control and enforce precise levels of access from the data sets, as well as the applications and the programs that actually interact with those data sets. Now, these can be, you can basically configure them and manage them through APIs, command lines of CDAP. We have integrated with Cloudera Manager Hue from a CDH perspective, and we have the Ranger UI integration for HDP actually. So HDP is not available as, the Ranger's integration is not available as a package release, but we can make that available to anyone who is interested to integrate that. So this whole authorization model is extensible. Currently, we have integrated with Sentry and Ranger, and also we have been working on LDAP integration for that. And some of our customers have requested for the LDAP, so that might not be available as part of the release, but you can send a request at info@cask, and we'll be able to provide you information about how to integrate that. Now, from an authorization perspective, authorization is enforced both at the data access layers as well as administration and management of entities in terms of lifecycle management. So you can enforce authorizations in terms of who can start a program, who can start an application, who can stop it, who are the people who can essentially delete, truncate data sets. Those kinds of operations are being very well supported with this release. What we have also done is, generally, in order to get a feel of how the whole authorization works, you have ability to test the whole authorization piece in a CI environment using an in-memory implementation. Okay, going to the next part, encryption. Encryption is essentially providing a secure store for users to safely store sensitive data like passwords and access keys. Now, we have exposed APIs that can be used in any programs, or it's made available in Hydrator through another feature that we are going to talk about called Macro. That can reference all of these encrypted keys that exist within CDAP, right? So, and access to these keys are being controlled and authorized by the user. So, like you have to have privileges to access those keys. Now, they can be configured at the key level, so each key can be controlled within. Currently, the integration is with Apache Sentry, so you can control at each key level in Apache Sentry who has access to it. So for in-memory and standalone mode, we use a file-based storage provider, JSX, storage provider. And for distributed mode, we integrate with Hadoop KMS actually for that. So the other aspect, so as you guys know, CDAP has been having this notion of namespace that is basically supports kind of like a multi-tenancy when you combine that with YARN queues. So many customers had requested to have an ability that allows them to access across different namespace. One of the use cases that we had been working on was you have a central use namespace. Think of an ingestion team that is basically pushing in all the data into their namespace. Now, there are different departments that want to have that data accessible to them in only read-only mode, right? So what the ingestion team can do is they can push in all of the data into their namespace and make it available to different namespaces depending on who wants to have access to it. So this is one of the capabilities that had been requested. So this has been added for the release 3.5. Now, with this, you can programmatically also access data in different namespace. We have exposed very simple to use APIs, and for people who have been using CDAP, you guys already know that like you can specify data sets which can be accessed within the same namespace. Now you can qualify that with the namespace from where you need to be accessing it. So for this to work, you need to have access to those data sets in those namespaces. And in order to gain access to it, you have to talk to the owner of the data sets in that namespace essentially. And they can configure it from a Hue command line or REST API. So from an impersonation perspective, as you guys know, previously we used to run everything as a CDAP user. And what that meant was any of the programs that ran or any of the applications that ran within CDAP would be using as CDAP as a user to generate any files, access any resources on the cluster. That can be not conducive to certain environments within enterprises. So one of the things that we did was ability to impersonate the user that you would like it to be. So that way, when you run programs, they're submitted to Yarn queue as that user. If they're accessing data sets, they will be accessing as that specific user that you have configured it to be. Now, you can map namespaces, applications, programs, and schedules to a specific Kerberos principle. And all these controls will be pushed down to the lower levels to circumvent any controls by external means. So if you set that app in CDAP, they will be pushed down all the way into the underlying system, so people cannot circumvent when they come outside from CDAP. So one other feature request that surfaced up in the past 6 months was, as we create these namespaces, we might be going into a cluster that already has certain resources already being created. Example, there is already an HDFS directory. There is already a HypeDB. There could be an HBase namespace. So this namespace mapping allows you to create a mapping at a CDAP layer that allows you to point and map it to underlying resources like HDFS, HBase, and Yarn. The only constraint that we have is once these resources are mapped, they cannot be modified. And currently, we don't support this configuration through UI. You would have to use REST APIs for creating the mapped namespaces. So let's go into the demo, and I'll show you how this whole authorization piece is integrated and works. So the first thing that I'm going to show you guys is, so I have a configured system where it's integrated with Sentry. So I'm going to first try to log in as myself. I don't have any permissions to any of the namespaces that exist. So as soon as I try to log in, it's going to basically say I'm not authorized to access any of the namespaces. So if I log out and log in as another user, Sri, and give his password, I can see now Sri has access to only one namespace. So he can build pipelines, he can look at, he can have applications, he can now look at all of the data sets that are within this specific namespace to which he is allowed access to. But if I go in as another user, let's call him Sagar. When you basically log in as Sagar, he has access to the namespace Sri, but he also has access to the default namespace, where there are different applications that have already been deployed in the cluster. So now when you look at how this whole thing works, it's being integrated into Sentry. So if you go into the Cloudera Manager, you will be able to look at what permissions have been given through. And this can be configured through Hue. So I go to other apps, and you can see you can configure authorization for CDAP through Hue, actually. So these are different namespaces, and you can see all of the artifacts that exist within CDAP show up in Hue UI. The same exists with actually Apache Ranger too. So all of the entities of CDAP will be surfaced up in that UI. So here you can control all of the different applications and pipelines and provide access to who can have access to it. You can do it at the namespace level itself. And that's what this CDAP is reacting to. It's essentially allowing only access to the certain namespaces that user has been authorized. Now, the one other thing that I want to show you guys is we talked about encryption. So if I go into the macros here, so this is one of the pipeline where you can essentially see how encryption works and it plays out. So you can essentially specify in Hydrator, when you want to access password, you can specify a feature like macros that allow you to access the SQL password from it. And this is not available as a plain text, even in the configurations. This is securely accessed by the authorized users at runtime when the jobs are running as that specific user. So this basically security is essentially allowing you to ensure that every entity that exists within CDAP can be authorized and you can provide a fine-grained access to those entities depending on your organizational needs or the needs of your users, essentially as part of the overall CDAP authorizations. So when you go back into different namespace, like when you switch the namespace, you see that namespace completely isolated. So the entities, like I said, the namespace have been underneath mapped. I don't want to go deep into the namespace mapping here because you have to get onto command lines and such. I don't want to spend too much time there, but you can see that the isolation has automatically happened. So every namespace is mapped to certain directories and HBase namespace and Hive DB behind the scene. So only the things that exist within those configured resources will be surfaced up in the CDAP UI. So that's all I have from the security perspective to show in CDAP. There's a lot goes behind the scene. I would encourage you guys to go take a look at download the release candidate that we have and play with the CDAP security and authorization capabilities that have been introduced. So I'm going to go back into the presentation mode and take you guys through what's new in the Hydrator. So from a Hydrator perspective, one of the major things that we constantly kept seeing was Hydrator was missing ability to do joins, right? And when we were doing a lot of data warehouse offloading work, most of the tables that existed were normalized tables. So we had have a way to easily get data from all of these different tables, be able to join them, denormalize them, and write them into HDFS or HBase or wherever that be. With 3.5, now we have introduced the join capability that allows users to join data from multiple data sets. You can combine external, internal. When I mean internal, it means HDFS files, HBase that exist on the cluster. You can do the joins across those. We support inner and outer joins. Now, the joins that are represented in Hydrator pipelines, underneath they can be executed as MapReduce and Spark. In the release 3.5, we only support equality operations on the join keys and for comparison on the composite keys. Join is available only in batch. We'll be adding soon the capability to do that in Spark. I mean, Spark already has that, so it's pretty easy to add that, but it's a visual thing that needs to be tidied up there. And one of the important things is once you basically use join capability in CDAP, you can automatically generate the output schema based on the join configuration. So you don't need to figure out what my output schema is going to be. If you just configure the join configurations, whether you're doing an inner join or an outer join, and you specify what are the fields that need to be there, pretty much the output schema gets generated automatically. So as you guys know, Hydrator pipelines are mostly data flow pipelines. What we have done is added a capability called action that allows you to combine the control flow and the data flow together in the same pipeline. And where are these actions being used? So a few use cases. One of the use cases, before the pipeline starts, to have an action that SSHs to a box, runs a script that would do the following, that would essentially look for any new files that have come. And if there are any new files, it would basically take those files, move it into HDFS, and then archive those files on the same machine, or could be archiving it somewhere else. Now, that's an action node. Now, that action node has moved the data from a remote machine onto HDFS, and what it does is it has passed the information of the files that has been moved to HDFS to the source that is going to be reading the file. Now, at that point is when the data starts getting processed as part of the data flow. So it's essentially doing a record by record transformations after that. So now currently in this release 3.5, action can be added at the start of the pipeline, right? So it's before any of the sources can be included, or it can be after any of the syncs have been added to the pipeline. So it's post syncs, past the sync, plugins are added. You can have action plugins, or before the source, you can have action plugins. And these action plugins can run any arbitrary code. It's Python code, R code, could be anything. If you have built any, if you have any existing C, C++ code, those also can be run as part of this. So it's essentially allowing you to SSH to a box and be able to run the command, and the output of that can be pushed into the pipeline that will start processing either record by record, or it can just be a collection of just action nodes. So you can use just the pure control flow to exist, right? You want to use this to SSH to a box, run an R code, then come back and do some other processing. With all of the scheduling capabilities that exist, you can use this purely as a control flow. The control flow here also supports more of forks and joins, so you can essentially do the same things that you're used to doing with other plugins. You can exactly do the same thing with action plugins. By default, as part of the package, you'll have SSH action that allows you to SSH to a box and run a command. You'll be able to connect to a database and run a query using an action. You'll be able to perform HDFS actions, like put, get, those kind of things as part of this plugin, HDFS action plugin. So like I said, actions are able to pass information to the data flow using macro variables. So when I ingest, upload a data to an HDFS file, I can specify a macro variable, macro name, like a path, and that path can be used in the file plugin to read the file and process all the records that exist within the file. A lot of people had been asking us that they needed an ability to be able to build the data pipelines logically in Hydrator, like they have been doing, but they want to be able to map it to Spark streaming. So all of the underneath, when it runs, it basically uses Spark streaming as a runtime engine. So with 3.5, that capability is available. What we have done is we have defaulted this as the real-time data pipeline in Hydrator. So that way, anytime when you build a real-time data pipeline, it would basically underneath be using Spark streaming. Now, it provides a drag and drop UI for creating pipelines that run on Spark streaming, named as real-time. You have capability to transform each record in the pipeline, similar to how currently Hydrator allows you to do. You can pretty much use most of the transform plugins that exist currently in Hydrator. It'll expose windowing capability as part of it. It's easily configurable, and it supports computing aggregates across the keys, actually. One of the interesting part of all of this is you can drag and drop include a lot of the machine learning models, mostly from ability to predict, label, and classify. We already have the batch data pipelines that allows you to build models. So combining these two together, you can essentially model using batch pipelines, and then you can score using real-time pipelines that would underneath be using Spark streaming to run. The APIs that are being exposed for all of the plugins that need to be for the real-time pipelines are highly extensible, and you can build your own plugins if need be. Now, from the Spark streaming underneath, engine underneath, we have integrated this with Apache Truffle so that it gives you an exactly one semantics. Going to the next one, like I said, macros. I gave you guys a little bit preview of macros when I was briefly talking about security. Macros are essentially a shorthand notation for retrieval precedence to workflow tokens and runtime arguments. So what we have done is, like, the macros are combining the workflow tokens that are being generated, providing access to those workflow tokens, as well as the run needs to be passed. So you can use a shorthand notation in different places, of either in CDAP or in Hydrator, to read these configurations pretty easily. What this allows you to do is allows you to, from a Hydrator perspective, allows you to reuse the pipelines. Previously, you had to make a change, you had to clone a pipeline, make a change, and deploy the pipeline and run again. With this capability, you wouldn't have to do that anymore. You would be able to introduce macros wherever you need change in configurations for every run, and you would be able to specify that as the argument while you run. These macros are specified at configure time. So the developer of the pipeline or the developer of the applications should define these macros, and once they are defined, there are APIs that allow you to retrieve what are the macros defined for this applications, or what are the pipelines defined for this particular, what are the macros defined for this particular pipeline, be able to use that to introspect the macros that were being configured. So now these macros are substituted on a per run basis. So if you specify the values for these macros, they would be substituted at runtime. So, macros allow just simple property lookups as well as macro functions. So we have introduced only a few macro functions. One of the things is having access to the secured keystore. But as you can see down below in examples, macros can be used in many different ways. And you can see we have added a few macro functions that allow you, that basically provide you or shows you how you can easily use them either in Hydrator or actually in CDAP programs. So macros can support, they allow combining multiple macros. You can have nested macros, and you can have macros can be recursive. So as you can see through the examples, there are examples for all of these. They can be pretty much, they are highly extensible, so you can add more functions if need be, but we are starting off with the two basic functions that it was built for. One is for accessing secure data, another is providing the logical start time when you are processing pipelines in a scheduled mode. So programmatic APIs allows developer to use this capability. So it's not just available for from a consumption perspective, but like when a plugin developer wants to use that, he can do the parsing of this and be able to get the actual values and tokens. So we have APIs to do all of that. The preview mode, this is an alpha feature that is coming out. It's an important one. There have been many requests from our customers essentially to support that. One of the major things that we have seen with Hydrator is as you build the pipelines, once you build the pipelines, you can validate. It validates only to a certain degree. You deploy the pipeline, and then you find there is an issue with it. This basically affects the overall productivity of the developer who is building the pipeline, and it slows down the iteration, number one. Number two, it basically it doesn't utilize the cluster really well. And even if you're not using in the cluster, you just get affected by the amount of time you spend iterating on this. So what we have done is with CDAP 3.5, we have introduced a preview mode. The preview mode allows you to functionally run the pipeline as if you would have run the pipeline when it was deployed, and provides an ability to investigate or provide insights into inputs and outputs of each node in the pipeline. So you have ability to read the data from the actual store, and this thing is only supported in the standalone mode. So coming back to new plugins that are being supported, you have a source plugin, which is we have added a few source plugins. We have a COBOL copybook. We have an XML input source plugin now. We have an XML input source plugin. We have an Excel plugin that allows you to read Excel files. And we have added an input source called FTP for reading FTP files. A few other plugins from a transform and science perspective, we have added a value mapper, an XML to JSON parser. So all these are documented and available as part of the release 3.5 documentation. So you will be able to get more details and examples related to this. The XML source allows you to read the source efficiently, but once you are able to identify an event, you can use an XML parser by specifying XPaths to extract certain elements within the XML. The row denormalizer and run normalizer allows you to pivot and unpivot the table. So this is an important capability that was requested and has been added as part of the 3.5 release. There's a few other things that we have added as part of this is order by. So we are adding more machine learning modelings into the data pipeline now. So you'll have logistic regression, which includes the trainer and scorer. We have the tokenizer and GDBT and RAT are being included. And as part of the sync, we have added a Solar sync for both real-time and patch. So now, getting into the demo from a hydrator perspective. So let me show you different pipelines and the capabilities that exist within that I just talked about. So let me change my namespace to this. Okay, so let's start with a very simple example. I talked about macros being used, so I can specify the macro. So this specific macro is actually reading the data from the secured store. This macro is considered as a runtime argument. So I don't want to, and anytime when I want to run this, I want to, let's say, use an user ID that I don't want to provide that as part of the configuration. You can think of like connecting to a different database could be a configuration like that that allows you to specify the configuration at runtime. So when I run this pipeline, it pops up, automatically pops up that there was a username configured as part of the pipeline, so you need to specify the value. Because it is configured as part of the pipeline, it's a required value to be there. It's a required macro that needs to be filled up with the value. So once I do that, that's when the Start Now button gets activated, so you can run the pipeline then. So it's a very useful and feature, and it makes it, it basically avoids you having to clone the pipelines and provide exact information and every time when you run the pipeline. Now, going to the action that we talked about. So you can see this is a very a simple pipeline that is essentially running an SSH action, which is SSHing to a box and running a simple script on that box. And that script is taking some of the data that exists within on that specific machine, and it's publishing that data to a stream, and then it starts processing that data and writes to an HBase table. So before this capability was not possible. So this is doing a record by record transformation here, but this is uploading all of the data in bulk, and it's actually running any like a random script on a machine that you have specified it to be. This part of the action could be, you can essentially fork and join. You can do a lot of stuff with that, similar to how you would do it with any with the data pipeline on this side. Now you can have SSH actions before the source and after the sync for this release. We are working on being able to include this in between the pipeline, anywhere in the pipeline. So in that case, what would happen is essentially you would have, if you're doing a record by record transformation and you introduce an action in between, it'll basically have to drop the file onto a temporary store and be able and have access to that. So that is something that we have been working on, we'll be working on for the next release. But in this release, you can use action before the source and after the sync. Okay, so when you look at from a join perspective, you can see you can take two different sources of data, customers and purchase in this example. It's a simple run for this webinar specifically. So you can combine these together in the join plugin here. So you can see you can have multiple streams coming in, multiple stages coming in. You can specify what are the different fields that needs to be selected, what is your join type, and what's your join condition. And the output schema gets generated automatically. So this is a deployed pipeline, but if you are working with a pipeline that is in development mode, you will be able to generate schemas from that automatically. You don't need to type the schema, it's automatically generated based on the configuration of the join. So the one last thing, few more things actually. So this is a pipeline that is showing that you can run a real-time pipeline that underneath uses Spark streaming. So this is a pipeline that is doing getting data from Kafka, doing group by aggregates. It's the same plugin that was built for batch is being used in here. So you can do aggregations in here. You can do transformations like using the same transformations that were built for the batch pipelines can be used pretty much here. And then you're writing that to an HBase table. Now, just to show you guys underneath, it's Spark. So if you go and view this within CDAP, you can see there is a Spark job that's actually running underneath, and it's always running. Okay, so I need to switch back to a standalone mode to show you guys how the preview would work. So I have a local instance running here. So as you can see, when you have a pipeline that you have built, this is a very simple pipeline that's taking a file, removing, it's a CSV file, it's removing the header, it's parsing the CSV, doing a bit of JavaScript transform, it's a very simple transform that it's doing, and then writing all of that data to, I think, a time partition file set. So when you want to validate this pipeline, you would get into a preview mode, so which will highlight these nodes that are going to be included as part of preview. In the first release, in this release, we are going to say that all the nodes would be highlighted. In the future release, you'll have ability to select the nodes that you want to preview, right? So you can think of like having ability to inject data at certain nodes, like test data at certain nodes, and see the results of the transformations once the node has finished processing. So the whole idea here is once these nodes are highlighted, I would be able to look at individual node and the outputs of an individual node. So this is actually right now processing a significant amount of data that I have set it up to be, right? So once this is finished, I can go in, like for example, I can go into a JavaScript transformation. So this is basically fetching up results for what was the input and what was the output that got generated. So if you look at it, I had input records coming as this, and my transformation generated essentially merged my last name and first name and included only a certain fields. So you can look at the configuration of the pipeline here, of the node here, and you can see this is exactly what I have done. So the preview feature makes it easy to debug or functionally make sure that your pipeline is doing as expected by providing ability to run it not in a contained environment, and be able to investigate and look at individual nodes or individual plugins and their results actually. So that is the basic capability that we have added into the tracker, and will be Hydrator for preview, and we'll be adding a lot more capabilities in the upcoming release for this. So now I'm going to switch back into the presentation mode and talk about the last item here is the tracker. So as you guys have seen and used different aspects of the tracker, tracker essentially provides input into what data is being accessed, how it's being accessed, who is accessing it, what's popular in your cluster, and the top data sets that are being accessed. So what that gives you is visibility into how the data is being used within your cluster. What we have done is we have provided basically with the data usage analytics, it provides an aggregated analytics based on time interval. So you can look at aggregations at like at a day level, month level, and like for all time levels. So you can basically generate all of these aggregates pretty easily with the new capability added into the tracker. These aggregations are based on audit log events. So tracker by itself is a CDAP application, which is analyzing all of the audit log events that are coming in and ensuring that those are being stored securely in a store. And all these aggregations that are being generated are surfaced in the tracker with a UI, with a very easy to use UI on top. The analytics is available at an individual dataset level and also at a global cluster level. So you can look at individual datasets and how they are performing, but you can aggregate it at a cluster level to see what are the different datasets and how they are like what are the top datasets and such. So we have added a new capability called Tracker Meter. It's a beta feature, and what it is meant to it basically is a scale from 1 to 100 that gives you the measure of the quality of the data. So it's some of it is based on profiling and some of it is based on a social metrics. So how people are accessing that data set, are the jobs accessing this data set are failing a lot. So all this information is being gathered and modeled into and then mapped onto a scale from 1 to 100. 1 is generally a really bad data set that it's having a lot of problems. The quality is not good. 100 is a good data set that has been really widely used and it has real good quality data. That's the data usage analytics part of it. Now, from a tracker perspective, we have added annotation and metadata taxonomy. So it allows you to add business tags. Previously, you could only view tags in a tracker, but now you can add tags and modify them and such there. So we have also added capabilities for user properties there. The one main feature that we have added in tracker from a tag perspective is preferred tags. They are standardized taxonomy of business tags, right? You can manage, so you can have your own taxonomy of tags which you have within your organization. You can upload them to the tracker, and every user, when he annotates, those are the tags that would be surfaced up within the tracker to annotate different data sets. So this allows the standardization across the board in terms of how you annotate different data sets. You can essentially manage all of the preferred tags through a tracker. You can promote, you can upload preferred tags, and we also support easy-to-use auto-completion while you're annotating. It makes it easy, and it provides you insight into how many other data sets have been tagged with this particular tag. So with that, I'm going to go into a brief demo related to the Cask tracker. So as you see that these pipelines are being, oh, I'm on the wrong cluster. Oh, yeah. So as you can see, the tracker is, you can see the top level metrics here. So these are different applications and top applications that have been accessed. These are top programs that are essentially active in terms of accessing the data sets, and these are the top data sets actually reading and writing from the data set. It's easy here to look at like one of the data sets. I'm just going to go into one of the data sets here. So you can see you can add tags. I have added here a preferred tag, which is a gold tag. So that can essentially provide you, it's already added, so it doesn't show up. But you can essentially annotate different tags in here. You can look at the usage of this specific data set. As you can see, this is a data set that is, semi-good. So it's essentially a measure which we call the trackerometer measure. So, and also we have added a preview capability that allows you to look at certain aspects of the data as part of it. So that's all I had for today. So with that, we will go ahead and take some time for questions now.
Great, Nitin, thank you very much. So yes, we have a few minutes left for questions. So just as a reminder to everyone, please go ahead and type your questions into the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel. So with that, it looks like we have a few questions. Let's start with Jeff. Jeff asks, are there plans for adding an HL7 plugin? Oh, and then there's a follow-up question. What are the other plugins that you plan to add?
So we are adding an HL7 plugin in the upcoming release. It's currently in works. So we will be having HL7 reader plugin that allows us to read the 0 to 53 different formats of it. We'll have capability for that. And the other plugins that there are a long list of plugins that we would be adding. Essentially, integration with like Salesforce, integration with Mercado. These are some of the plugins that would be available. That are next on our list that would be made available as part of the Hydrator release. So that's a lot more long list of plugins. But if you have certain plugins that you would like to see in Hydrator, please do send us an email or open up a ticket.
Great. So next up is a question from Russ. Russ asks, we have CDAP deployed with a version of HTTP that uses Kafka 0.9, and we have not previously been able to integrate Spark streaming with this version. Will we be able to integrate Spark streaming with Kafka 0.9?
So, I think currently the plugin supports 0.8. We will make sure that the 0.9 works. So I don't think we have tested it with 0.9 yet, but we'll see if we can integrate that in either in the follow-up release that would be post of 3.5, or if we can get it in this release, we'll make sure of it. But as of now, I don't think 0.9 is supported.
Okay. Next question is from Peter. Peter asks, do actions require the use of SSH?
Yes, they do, because these are actually running on a cluster in any node. So you want to have a designated node where on the edge where you would be running all of your scripts, because we don't want it to be, if you are going to be installing it on individual machines wherever they are, that's also possible. But this specific action, that SSH action that we provide, requires you to SSH to a box.
Good. Okay. Colin asks, when would preview be available in distributed mode?
Preview is currently alpha. Our plan is to make it available generally in distributed as well as standalone fully in around 4.0 timeframe.
Nice. Okay. Next question is from Sean. How do I upgrade from 3.3 or 3.4 to the latest 3.5?
So we have a migration path for this. So when you do install 3.5, you would have to run the upgrade tool that allows you to migrate from the previous version. So there are certain versions that are documented in the 3.5 release that would essentially be looking at 3.4 or 3.3 would be able to migrate that to 3.5 easily. There are no major incompatible changes as part of 3.5.
Nice. Then last question that we have here is from James, who asks, when is the integration with HTTP Apache Ranger available?
So the Ranger is already available. We have just not included as part of this specific release. But if you guys are interested and want to try it out, please send us an email at info@cask. We'll be more than happy to work with you and give you access to and help you set up the Apache Ranger configuration.
Great. If there's any more questions, please type them in. We'll wait for one more second here. But it looks like we've covered all of our questions. I don't see anything else coming in. So Nitin, is there anything else you wanted to cover before we wrap up?
Nope. I think we are good for now. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure being with you today.
Great. Thank you, Nitin, and thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar, What's New in CDAP 3.5. If you have any other questions, please email them to us at info@cask.co. For more information, please check out our resource section on cask.co. And once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate if you complete that and provide your feedback. We'll also include a link to view a recording of today's webinar. On behalf of Cask and our presenter, Nitin, thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.